the whole movement of green, more sustainable? What's the impact that you make? What's the impact that you make through the entire supply chain, from the very bottom all the way to the end consumer, and how that ecosystem works together? Walk us through kind of your transition and the whole word having sustainability in the title, and how that impacting.
Especially global companies like PepsiCo, like Coca-Cola, like many others that have operations in other parts of the world, were kind of having to deal with questions around sustainability decades ago. So, if you're operating in Europe, if you're operating in parts of Asia or even South America, you would think, oh, maybe in South America, it's not so much of a big deal. But in certain countries, certain topics around sustainability were very, very important. In Brazil, for example, and deforestation is huge. Similarly in other parts of Asia, there are certain aspects like around water that are tremendous. So I think she had her antenna up very early on and really started to, rather than deal with it as a threat to her business, she saw it as an opportunity. And that was very, very powerful. I would say Coca-Cola was maybe, shortly thereafter starting to kind of take notice. It's very well publicized that Coca-Cola dealt with some real challenges around water availability and water scarcity, especially in India and in other parts of Asia. And I think that was a little bit of a lightning bolt moment for the company. But at the same time that was happening here in the US, Coca-Cola was dealing with a lot of issues around sugar, obesity. There were magazines that had on the front page like a big fat Santa Claus with his giant, jug of Coke. That was not the image that any of us needed in that business. And so I think that having both kind of an undercurrent of what are we trying to do here that's right for the environment and right for the business, along with, frankly, that external pressure that was really difficult to deal with, really pushed, I think, a lot of big companies to a place where they had to look themselves in the mirror and say, okay, how are we really addressing this from the ground up? For me personally, having kind of lived in that finance and strategy space, like sustainability is not a natural connection to that, but it is, because a lot of the issues that we were dealing with were really big strategic issues. So I'll give you an example. Whether we're talking about sugar or plastics, for example, when a large part of your profit stream is dependent on sugar-based beverages or beverages bottled in plastic, all of a sudden you sit up and take notice, and you have to take a step back and think not only about what am I going to do from an environmental perspective to get in a better place, but what am I going to do to not only protect my business, but transform this so that it becomes much more viable for the future state. And so that's really how I started to get involved in a lot of sustainability related topics. And the more I got involved, actually, I realized that there was a cultural issue at play, and actually an organizational issue at play. And the issues were, number one, you had pockets of the company where there were, people that were doing tremendous work in public policy, in technology, and other areas where they were really trying to solve major problems that, were going to help us from a sustainability standpoint. But they were on the fringes, and it wasn't really something that was incorporated into the core strategy or the mission of the company. And not only was it not incorporated into the values or the strategy, but also wasn't incorporated into how we made decisions, into how we ran the business. And so that was a structural issue. And so actually, this is happening during the pandemic. We had the opportunity, because of a major reorganization, to really rethink how we did sustainability. And I had an opportunity to really shape for Coca-Cola, let's structure this so that it's actually a core part of our operations and make it almost like its own, business unit that's integrated into the rest of our business. So that was my, my opportunity to really kind of think very differently. And we created a whole team, frankly, not a very big one, but a team that was not made up of sustainability experts, because there are a lot of sustainability experts that are amazing. We had those, but actually of people who knew how to do marketing, franchise leadership, business development, the things that actually are the core part of how you run a company. And their job was to figure out how to take sustainability and embed it into different parts of our business.